Over the last year and a half, I've had the absolute pleasure of working with Chris Gallivan. Chris is a principal flow advisor at TaskTop, now PlanView, and Chris has an extensive history in improving workflow in the automotive industry. His experience ranges from DevOps to platform engineering, from software development to embedded systems. Chris is the proud father of a two pizza team and a lifelong musician. Chris and I met up in Austin while attending a Plan View event to discuss his approach on how he helps organizations understand flow and workflow optimization. I've learned a lot by observing Chris over the last year and a half, and I thought it would be great to get him on this video to record some of his style, some of his approaches. I'm really grateful for Chris's thoughtful insights and patience while setting up camera gear and recording on a very windy balcony in Austin. Hope you enjoy. Over the last year and a half, I've really been amazed at your ability to, you just keep showing up and you just keep on keeping on and working with customers and helping them get to understand things that they were rejecting earlier on, with major telecom and finance, and I think you're working with all industries, right? Yeah, so I just, like, from the get-go, I wanted to capture how you go about, what is your protocol, what is your strategy to help people get flow? And maybe start by describing how you define flow.
Sure.
Yeah.
So flow is kind of an abstract thing, but for me, the thing that I anchor it on is the customer. So that's how I think about it. So I think about, if I was a customer of a product, how long would I think it took? When do I think the clock started for my request? What do I feel about the quality of the product? So that's how I kind of view value streams and flow. It's basically just aligning yourself to what your customer thinks about, and then really trying to improve that, because obviously if you improve that, then you'd improve your customer's perspective.
Yeah.
So I mean, every customer is different. So I mean, and sure, there are some that are the same, but there's some that are really different. There's one I'm working with now that their IT group is very modernized, and I would say that they're using a lot of the best practices, recent next practices, let's say, from DevOps, and the business side is still very kind of old school. So what I've observed there is that by using value stream management and flow, it highlights to them this sort of gap between IT and the business. It's funny because people within the company all have different perspectives. It depends if they're in the group that's maybe more evolved, or if they're still in the business side that's thinking, thinking a little bit more old school. So again, like your question about how do you help people get it, it depends on the person, because each person is going to have a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, let's take the example where you had the traffic simulator of the cars going around. Describe how that helped. Describe what that is and how that helped.
So whenever you're trying to understand something, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I have some friends that wrote a book that isn't out yet. It's about basically learning. It's about learning. And they describe learning as kind of like a physical thing. It's actually a neuron that connects to another neuron and makes a connection. And one of the things I did a pre-read of their book, and one of the things they said is, if you already know how something works and there's something new that you want to learn, if you could attach that new thing to that thing you already understood, then it's less building that has to occur. It's an easier build. So the traffic simulation is simply just trying to use that example. Like, use something that people already understand. They already feel pain about, anyone who's ever sat in traffic, and then try to link flow to it with the hope that it would sustain. The learning would sustain, because I think that's one of the biggest things is that we all read books, we all learn stuff, but how much of that learning actually winds up sustaining with us, lasting. I took this class, this Edward Tufte class last year. I read a Edward Tufte book, and
Yeah, I took that class.
did you take
too,
the class? Yeah, a lot of people have taken that class.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said in there, he said a lot of things that stuck with me, but one thing he said was, we want to present data to people, to humans, to basically take advantage of the things that they do really well. And he went on to describe, what do humans do well, and he basically said they're really good at taking in a lot of data and then drawing conclusions based on the data. So if you look at what we do with things like PowerPoint and other things that we try to do, we actually try to do the thinking for them, which is funny because it's actually what they don't do well. So we actually dumb them down and instead of taking advantage of what they do well. So the roundabout, to me, probably is something that humans would do really well. Take a lot of data from a lot of different sources and use their brains and adjust.
I wanted to ask you a bit about how you got where you are now.
So it's not something that was planned out at all for me. I haven't really planned out my career. It just kind of happened. So I started off in my life as a musician. That was my ambition. I want to be a musician.
Guitar?
Yeah, I played guitar.
Yeah.
I was in a band, and did that for I think maybe 8 to 10 years out of high school, and then it didn't work out, and I had to go back to school. And so I was going to school, and I was 10 years older than the kids that were straight out of high school, and because of that, I felt a lot of fear. If you can imagine, I had forgotten most of the stuff that they all knew because they were just in class, last week or something. So that fear actually wound up motivating me, and I wound up just really, I think I formed a lot of my habits in that period of time because I was so driven to not be the fool, in the class that doesn't know what's going on. So I did all my homework, I strove to understand what I was learning, not just memorize it. So I came up with all these techniques that I think I still use to this day to try to give meaning to things. One of the things I learned was if you don't do something with what you've learned, you lose it.
Yeah.
So I would actually try to use it, and I still do that a lot. So you might see me doing a bunch of experiments. I think that's probably why, because even when I was reading your book or any book, I'll get done with chapter 1, and I'll be trying to use it. You'll find me at work and I'll be using it. I don't want to necessarily finish the rest of the book. I want to start using it right away. And I think that's why, for me at least, I'm able to, I get value out of it. I learn well, because I'm actually trying to apply it. So I went to school, I did really well. Started working in the automotive industry. Spent about 20 years there. I was one of those guys that bumped his head a lot. I reached a level and I couldn't get any higher. And like a lot of folks that are trying to drive changes in big organizations, every year you get your review, and every year your review tells you that you're not good enough to go to the next level or to take another step. And then, again, that was something that wound up really motivating me, year after year after year after year of hearing that. So when the opportunity came to work for Task Top and work with you and to work with Carmen and Mick and everyone else, I took it. So that's how I wound up here, motivated by fear and rejection.
Fear is a strong motivator. Yeah. We have similar backgrounds in that way because I had 2 children first, and then I went back to school, and then I worked for Boeing for a number of years, and then I had 2 more children, and I took 5 years off away. And when I came back to Boeing, everything had changed. And I felt so dumb and so far behind, and I worked so hard just to get caught up again. And so I recognize that feeling of being behind.
I know how that feels.
Yeah. Who's influenced you over the years? Who do you admire, and why? And who have those people been?
I mean, I've really been super lucky. So, like, I work with you. Obviously, I admire you. I work with Carmen. I admire Carmen.
Yeah.
I've worked with Woody Zool. I admire Woody. So it's the people that I've worked with that I really admire. You know, I admire people that write books, but I've been lucky enough to work with the book writers. You know, and it's really enriched my life. A couple more: Joel Tosi, Deanne Stewart. They wrote a book called Creating Your Dojo. So I've been really lucky to work with some really smart people.
Now you're going to Chicago to the dojo that's coming up. Yeah, in March or
April, I think.
April. Yeah, that's going to be fun. You're going to get to see some of your buddies.
Yeah, it's funny because the first time they had this is, I think, an interesting story. The way that I found my way to DevOps was I went to the 2018 summit because my boss was supposed to speak and she didn't want to. So she just sort of said, "Chris, you go. I don't want to go." And I said, "Okay." And I didn't honestly really know that much about DevOps at the time. So I spoke at the summit with John Ediger, who's another person that I learned a lot from DXC. And I was like, these people are doing this stuff. I cannot believe what they're doing. I was calling her and saying, "You should have came to this. You really missed something here." So I learned a lot this summer, but afterwards what happened was amazing. So this community kind of embraced me, this community of people that were like me, trying to drive changes at large organizations. And they had a Slack channel, and I was just asking a lot of questions. I would ask questions like every day. I'd ask questions on Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, I know. I always see stuff on LinkedIn and in the Slack on weekends.
I was asking so many questions, and these guys were really patient with me, and they answered all my questions. And they had an in-person conference, I think it was in 2019, and I asked if my company would sponsor it. They said no, so I sponsored it myself. I sponsored myself. I drove to Minneapolis. I did a Target Dojo tour. At the time, that was what we were. It was the conference was in Minneapolis. So the funny thing was, there was about 5 or 6 of us that were all sort of stuck in these large organizations, and then around the same time we all left. So one went to Twitter, one went to the Department of Defense, one went to GitHub, one went to Atlassian, I went to TaskTop. We all got plucked out of our roles, our frustrating roles, with the opportunity to maybe do something bigger.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an interesting story.
If you could wave a magic wand, what would you do?
So I like to figure this out, you know, this work we do. I feel like we've all had some success, but I don't think any of us feel like we killed it, you know, like I think we all feel like there's more to do. And I would really like to be here and see some of us really figure it out, and really sustain some of this improvement.
Define it.
I suppose you could say flow, or, you know, value to customer.
Value stream management.
Value stream management.
Well, it is emerging. It is pretty new, and not all the customers have the desire to change how they're working now. And even if they do, they rarely have the capacity to take it on. So it's a real challenge in that kind of environment. How do you people are just overloaded at work. How do they find the capacity to do it? But you've been I'm reminded of you telling me once that you were doing just really short sessions more frequently. And I think that it sounds like that would be a way to get a daily practice in. People. Otherwise, once a week, I found it's not enough.
When I was in the dojo, I spent like 2 years, and it was pretty much that whole concept, like small little bite-sized things, we used to do 2.5-day sprints. So it was really short, focused sprints, and we were learning as we went, and then we would apply it immediately. Apply, learn, iterate, iterate, iterate. So that idea makes more sense to me than like front-loading some sort of learning, and then later they forget it, of course, because they're going to be doing other things.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Chris Gallivan on learning and his ideas on how to apply, iterate, and experiment. I'm Dominica DeGrandis, and you can reach me on LinkedIn or at my website at dgrandis.com. Thanks for your support.